customary wrap on environmental insurance is that it's a specialized product only purchased by companies with an exposure so obvious that they're legally required to carry some sort of cover. 10 years ago, that might have been the case. Today, however, a combination of severe weather events, expensive lawsuits, and highly publicized environmental risks are leading many smaller companies to consider their exposures and seek appropriate coverage. Insurance Business America recently visited the offices of Freberg Environmental Insurance in Denver to gain some insight on emerging trends as well as some opportunities for producers in this market. Freberg is a highly regarded specialist in developing, marketing, and underwriting environmental insurance programs. We sat down with 20-year industry veteran Stacy Brown, the president and managing partner of Freberg Environmental, to get his take on the issues in this installment of a 4-part series.
There have been circumstances with hurricanes recently that have caused mold events in residential areas. The contractors that go in to remediate that mold need to have contractors' pollution liability coverage in place in the event that they don't perform their work appropriately, or perhaps in the course of their work they cause a pollution condition. So that would be a very real and recent circumstance. There's been a lot of flooding in Colorado, hurricanes, Katrina, Irene, things like that. Those are certainly cases where a contractor's pollution liability would be something that a contractor absolutely would have to have. I think insurance agents should take a very close look at their books of business and try to identify those customers where they are managing very large quantities of raw materials. If you have an agent and they go through their books of business and they try to identify those customers that manage materials that could be pollutants if they're released in an uncontrolled manner, that would be a great place to start. Clearly, there's some very obvious examples, landfills, wastewater treatment plants, facilities like electroplaters that manage very large quantities of hazardous materials. Those are pretty obvious. It's the hidden exposure that I think agents really need to take a good hard look at their books of business. They could always call someone in the environmental insurance industry and we could walk them through any type of account they have and try to help them determine whether or not their customer has an environmental exposure. That's something that we do all the time. I think a lot of business owners don't believe they have an exposure, or they don't think they're going to have an accident. And those are two very false notions to have. Environmental incidents can crop up in a number of different ways. There may be hotel owners that have mold issues because there's a leak behind a wall, a small drip that results in mold contamination. Those types of exposures typically go unseen until they're discovered, and once they're discovered, it can be very, very costly to remediate those types of exposures. Yes, the commercial general liability policy, in all circumstances, it's excluded. Pollution is excluded on those policies unless specifically endorsed. Most GL policies, if they do provide pollution, in many cases provided on a sudden and accidental basis, meaning that it's only going to provide cover in the event that a spill is discovered and reported to the carrier in a very short period of time. That's different than the coverage that we provide and most of the other environmental insurance specialists. They provide coverage for gradual pollution events. So there's not a time element trigger which would limit coverage in the event of release and discovery sometime at a much later date. Those types of incidents on a sudden and accidental policy are not covered. So in my view, any kind of facility that handles these types of materials should have a policy that provides gradual pollution coverage as well as sudden and accidental.